You might recall back in May, Trump seized upon an outrageous conspiracy theory percolating in far-right circles, a theory based upon an extreme mischaracterization of the FBI search warrant of Mar-a-Lago. Trump claimed in a fundraising email that President Biden and the FBI were, quote, locked and loaded to take me out during the 2022 search of Mar-a-Lago. He later posted that Biden, quote, authorized the FBI to use deadly lethal force. But what Trump tried to portray as an attempt on his life, really just a distortion of the standard boilerplate language that accompanies every FBI search. His false narrative was based entirely on this, the FBI's policy on the use of force. Basically, it says that agents can respond with deadly force only when their lives are in imminent danger. So that language, not unique to the search of Mar-a-Lago. In fact, it was the very same policy that the FBI used in their search of President Biden's home as well. If anything, throughout the process of recovering those documents from Mar-a-Lago, Trump got an unusual amount of leniency, including the fact that the FBI notified the Secret Service before executing the warrant. Oh, one other thing. Trump and his family, they weren't even at Mar-a-Lago while that search took place. But none of those inconvenient facts stopped Trump's allies from amplifying his lie.
They're saying Trump's going to unleash assassination squads on his enemies? But Biden unleashed armed agents into Trump's house, authorizing them to use deadly force.
Right.
Maybe they were looking for a little action.
Maybe.
Something actually could have gone down, I guess, at Mar-a-Lago, beyond just looking for the documents.
Why was Merrick Garland prepping for a possible, shootout?
Merrick Garland basically issued a kill order for President Trump.
Now, for Jack Smith, all of that was obviously real cause for concern. And in a recent filing, he urged Judge Cannon to impose a narrow modification to the terms of Trump's release to limit what he can say. Smith wrote that Trump is left to argue that the First Amendment will be eroded unless he is permitted to lie about FBI agents intending to murder him and his family. The law requires no such thing. He then pointed to how Trump's rhetoric has led to imminent threats to law enforcement, including an example of a Trump supporter armed with an AR-15 and a nail gun attempting to attack an FBI office in Ohio 3 days after the Mar-a-Lago search took place. He pointed out that hours after Trump posted on his social media platform about the search, the supporter posted, "Kill FBI on sight." So this afternoon, Jack Smith's prosecutors made their case to Judge Cannon in Fort Pierce. They once again cited Trump's false claims that he was the target of an assassination attempt, and told the court there was no reason for such incendiary language that would invite violence as retribution from Trump supporters. In response, Judge Cannon asked, "Where do you see the call to violence?" During another exchange, Cannon grew so frustrated with the prosecution that she said, quote, "I don't like your tone." Again, she said that to a prosecutor just trying to protect law enforcement from threats of violence. And I wish I could say I'm surprised. Kristy Greenberg is the former deputy chief of the criminal division in the Southern District of New York. Mary McCord is the former deputy assistant attorney general for national security at the Department of Justice. And Katie Phang is the host of the Katie Phang Show on MSNBC. She was in court today in Fort Pierce, Florida. Katie, my Florida woman, let's start with you. You were in the courthouse. Jack Smith, he was in the courthouse today. Seems like this hearing got fairly heated at certain points. Your big takeaways?
Yeah, and you're right about that. I was focusing a lot on Jack Smith because I wanted to see his expressions on his face when David Harbach, who's a part of the special counsel legal team, was having the back and forth with Judge Cannon. Judge Cannon, on previous occasions with this particular attorney, David Harbach, has had issues with him and vice versa. I don't think that she appreciates the gravity of what was being presented to her, because she immediately, not because there was a suggestion made by the other side in terms of the defense, but she immediately said, but what about the fact that redactions have been done of the names of law enforcement and other witnesses? How is that not enough for me to consider when you're making this argument, government, that there's some danger or risk to the law enforcement officers? And she really kind of hung her hat on that throughout a lot of what happened today. But the hearing is about 2 hours. Special counsel Jack Smith, poker face the entire time, even when there was a lot of the heated exchange between Judge Cannon and the attorney for the special counsel's office. But there were some really striking things that really stood out today, Alicia. One of the things was the special counsel saying, you don't need a tragedy to strike. in order to get a bond modification. And the law supports that context and that idea. There was also another phrase that was used by special counsel's office. They said Trump has a peculiarly potent tool, and that's his ability to reach his followers on social media. Trump himself has acknowledged in writing and in verbal statements that he knows the power of social media for him. And that's why there was the argument from special counsel's office that you don't need something bad to happen. You don't need a link between those examples that you just read and explained to our viewers and Donald Trump to say that the causal link there creates the need. It's actually the threat of significant, imminent, foreseeable danger to these law enforcement officers. Now, Todd Blanche, on behalf of Donald Trump, did his meandering thing that he does, but he basically said, Judge, eventually maybe this will have to happen, maybe at trial when these witnesses are called, but otherwise you don't have a link and a direct connection between Trump and these incidents that have been raised as exhibits and examples in special counsel's motion. And because of that, it's a prior restraint on free speech. He's a political candidate for the office of the president, and it's on the eve of a presidential debate, and you shouldn't do it.
Mary, how would you push back against that supposed lack of connective tissue between Donald Trump's words and the threat of violence against law enforcement officials?
I think the way to push back is the way that Jack Smith and his team have done, have explained in every court where they've sought an order like this. This one is different because this is about modifying the conditions of his bail in order to restrict certain speech that causes, again, that significant and imminent foreseeable danger to law enforcement. But in every other case, including in D.C. and up in Manhattan, the prosecutors have given example after example of things that Mr. Trump says over social media or at campaign rallies and actions and threats taken by individuals out in the United States. Those might be call-in threats, threatening witnesses, threatening judges' staff, threatening prosecutors and their staffs. It might be actual efforts to commit an act of violence, like the example from right after the search of Mar-a-Lago. And, you know, there are many, many, many of these that they have to point to. So to suggest there's not a cause and effect, I think really is to ignore what several years now have shown us. I think it was reasonable for her to ask, would redactions take care of it? And what Mr. Harbach explained is, well, even with redactions, there have been leaks of the names of those agents, and those are available, you know, out there still. They can't ever be taken down once that has leaked. And I actually think the redactions have probably prevented them from being that tragedy that, you know, we don't want to have to wait for. But somebody who is determined can certainly find out the identity of these agents.
So, Kristy, Katie had her eyes on Jack Smith for good reason. You had your eyes on Eileen Cannon, and you wrote on Twitter, only Judge Cannon could use a hearing about Trump's dangerous lies that the FBI was out to kill him and his family as an opportunity to scold the prosecutor and not Trump for lack of decorum.
So it makes sense to me that this prosecutor was getting fired up about this, because this is a prosecutor who's worked with these agents and built this case and knows these people and knows that they're putting their lives on the line every day for us. And this idea that she would be so cavalier, I think, to the fact that there really is a threat to them. I mean, this motion by Jack Smith was filed a month ago, right? And clearly she doesn't see any imminent threat because she didn't deal with it right away. She sat on it. And while she was sitting on it, what happened? Well, there was a call-in, a threat to an FBI agent on Hunter Biden's case. And that person said, if Trump wins, you're all going to jail. And if Trump loses, you'll be slaughtered and your family will be slaughtered. Those are the kinds of threats. And this idea that Judge Cannon is saying, well, where's the cause and effect? You know, Donald Trump didn't tell that person to say this. But Donald Trump himself connects A to B, because Donald Trump has said, he said it in the CNN town hall, that they listen to me, my supporters listen to me like no one else, right? He knows the effect that he has. And we all know the effect he has. And so does Judge Cannon. So this idea that there is not an imminent threat to these agents is just frankly laughable. And the idea that she is scolding the prosecutor for getting upset about that and for trying to make his point, rather than say to a criminal defendant in a case, you can't talk about the case agents that way. You can't say these kinds of things. Any other criminal defendant, any other judge would be scolding a criminal defendant for making statements like that.
So, Katie, given that she's not exactly moving with alacrity, what comes next for this motion on the bond modification?